The inheritance that ruined my family and exposed our darkest hidden secrets. The silence in the house used to be a comfort. It was the sound of our lives settling, of peace earned. Now, it's a suffocating blanket, heavy with unspoken things, with the ghosts of who we were and who we've become. I can't even stand to be in the same room as the damn armchair anymore, the one he always sat in, the one that's suddenly worth more than my entire childhood. And if you're finding yourself drawn into stories like these, stories that pull you in deep and don't let go, then do us both a favor and hit that subscribe button. Ring the bell so you don't miss the next part. And if this resonates with you at all, give it a like, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and leave a comment below. Your feedback means everything. My dad, he was a fixture, solid, predictable. The kind of guy who'd be out on the lawn mowing at 8 a.m. sharp on a Saturday, rain or shine. He smelled faintly of sawdust and Old Spice, a comforting combination that was as much a part of our home as the worn rug in the living room. My mom, she was the fire, the laughter. She kept things bright, even when the days got long and the bills piled up. They were a unit, a team, and I never, not once, questioned that. Not until the lawyers started showing up. It all started after Grandpa died. He was a quiet man, Grandpa. Worked hard, saved harder. Lived in that same small house on Elm Street for 50 years. Never flashy, never one for drama. He was the anchor, the steady presence in a world that sometimes felt like it was spinning too fast. When he passed, it was a sad day, of course, but not a surprising one. He was old, lived a good, long life. We all went to the funeral, a somber affair in a cramped church basement that smelled of lilies and old hymnals. My dad, stoic as ever, just nodded and thanked everyone for coming. My mom, bless her heart, was the one handing out tissues and making sure everyone had a cup of coffee. That was them, always taking care of the details, even in grief. The will reading was supposed to be routine, a formality. My dad and his two sisters, Aunt Carol and Aunt Susan, were the beneficiaries. Standard stuff. Grandpa had worked his fingers to the bone, built up a decent little nest egg, and wanted to make sure his kids were taken care of. We were all there, crammed into a law office that felt far too sterile for something so personal. The lawyer, a slick guy named Mr. Davies, read through the clauses, his voice droning on about trusts and estates. It was all so dry, until he got to the part about the Elm Street house. And the property located at 123 Elm Street, including all its contents and appurtenances, is hereby bequeathed in its entirety to Robert Rob Miller. Silence. Thick, heavy silence. Everyone looked at my dad. He looked blindsided. His jaw was tight, his eyes darting between the lawyer and his sisters. Aunt Carol, who always had a sharp tongue and an even sharper eye for injustice, practically sputtered. Wait a minute, the entire house? To Rob? What about us? Mr. Davies, unflustered, cleared his throat. Mr. Miller's will is quite specific. The entirety of the Elm Street property, including all furnishings, vehicles, and personal effects, is left to his son, Robert Miller. My dad finally spoke, his voice a low rumble. Grandpa, he never mentioned this, not a word. Aunt Susan, the quieter of the two sisters, wrung her hands. I don't understand. We're his daughters. We always helped him out. We visited every week. Her voice cracked. The air in that room crackled with unspoken accusations, with years of resentment simmering just beneath the surface. My dad's face was a mask of confusion and a dawning sense of unease. He kept looking at the will, as if the words themselves were shifting and changing before his eyes. He was my dad, the man who taught me how to ride a bike, how to throw a baseball, how to tie my shoes. He was always so straightforward, so honest. This felt wrong. We left the office in a tense quiet. My mom tried to break the ice, suggesting we all grab lunch, but the invitation fell flat. Aunt Carol drove off in a huff, her tires squealing as she pulled out of the parking lot. Aunt Susan just stood on the sidewalk, looking lost and hurt. My dad just stared straight ahead, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. That was the first crack. Small, barely noticeable, like a hairline fracture in porcelain, but it was there. Over the next few weeks, the atmosphere in our house changed. The silence was no longer comfortable. It was charged. My dad became withdrawn, spending hours in his garage, tinkering with things that didn't need tinkering. He'd always been a man who liked to stay busy, but this was different. This was an avoidance. He wouldn't talk about the will,
wouldn't talk about his sisters. When my mom tried to bring it up, he just shut down, his eyes going distant. "He's stressed, honey," she'd say to me, her own voice tinged with worry. "It's a lot to take in. He never expected that house. He feels bad for his sisters." But I saw something else in his eyes, something more than just stress or guilt. It was a flicker of something darker, something guilty. The Elm Street house sat empty, a monument to Grandpa's quiet life, and now a source of immense turmoil. My dad inherited it, yes, but the contents were the real kicker. Grandpa had been a collector, a hoarder of sorts, but not in the messy, disorganized way you see on TV. His collections were meticulously organized, tucked away in boxes, in drawers, in the attic. He had vintage watches, rare coins, first edition books. And then there were the other things. Things that didn't fit the narrative of the quiet, unassuming man we all knew. One Saturday, my dad finally agreed to go through some of the boxes with us. My mom, ever the optimist, saw it as a way to mend fences, to find sentimental treasures. I saw it as a chore, a necessary evil. We went over to the old house. The air inside was stale, thick with the scent of aged paper and dust. Sunlight streamed through the grimy windows, illuminating motes dancing in the air. It felt like stepping back in time, into Grandpa's world. We started in the living room, sorting through old photo albums. Pictures of my dad as a kid, my mom and dad on their wedding day, me as a toddler. Standard stuff. Then we moved to the study. That's where things started to get weird. Grandpa's desk was a fortress of paperwork, bills, bank statements, and then, tucked away in a locked drawer, a small leather-bound ledger. My dad fumbled with the lock for a minute, his hand shaking slightly before it sprang open. The pages were filled with neat, precise handwriting. At first, it looked like a financial record, dates and amounts. But as we flipped through, the entries became more cryptic. Initials, locations, small sums of money, much smaller than the kind of money you'd expect from an inheritance. And then there were the coded notes, symbols. "What is this, Dad?" I asked, my voice unnervingly loud in the quiet room. He slammed the ledger shut, his face pale. "Nothing, just old notes, Grandpa's ramblings." My mom reached out, her hand hovering over the ledger. "Robert, maybe we should just put it away. It's not important." But it was important. I could feel it. The air in the room seemed to thicken, to hum with a low, unsettling energy.
My dad's usual calm demeanor was gone, replaced by a frantic sort of energy. He was shoving things back into drawers, his movements jerky and uncoordinated. "We need to go," he said, his voice tight. "Now." We left the house that day with a handful of photo albums and a gnawing sense of unease. The Elm Street house, once a symbol of Grandpa's simple life, now felt like a tomb filled with secrets he had taken to his grave. The inheritance, which should have been a blessing, was becoming a curse. The phone calls started soon after. My dad's sisters, heated, angry, accusatory. They'd found things too in the attic, boxes filled with old correspondence, not just with them, but with people we'd never heard of, names that didn't belong, places that were far from home. My Aunt Carol, her voice trembling with rage, accused my dad of knowing more than he was letting on. "He always favored you, Rob," she'd scream down the phone. "Always you. And now this? What are you hiding?" My dad would just hang up or pace the floor, his face a mask of grim determination. He started drinking more. Not to excess, not at first, but enough to notice. A glass of whiskey in the evening, then two. The easy laughter that used to fill our home grew scarce, replaced by hushed arguments between my parents, or the deafening silence of my dad's internal battle. One evening, I overheard my mom crying in the kitchen. I crept to the door, my heart pounding. "He's not telling me everything, Sarah," she choked out, her voice raw with pain. "I know it. He's keeping something from us, and I'm so scared." And that's when I started to really look, really see. My dad's evasiveness, his sudden mood swings, the way he'd flinch when the phone rang, the late nights spent staring out the window. It wasn't just the inheritance, it was something deeper, something rotten, festering beneath the surface of our perfect suburban lives. The ledger, the coded notes, the mysterious correspondence, it all started to coalesce into a terrifying picture. Grandpa wasn't just a quiet, hard-working man. He was something else entirely. And my dad was caught in the middle of it, tangled in a web of secrets that were now threatening to consume us all. The breaking point came a few weeks later. My dad had been out for hours. It was late.
My mom was asleep, exhausted and worried. I was in my room, trying to study, but my mind was a million miles away. Then I heard the car pull into the driveway. Not my dad's car, a different one, older, slower. I went to the window, peering through the blinds. A man was getting out of the car. He was wearing a worn leather jacket, his hair slicked back. He looked out of place, too hard-edged for our quiet street. He walked up the porch steps, and my dad opened the door. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I could see the body language. My dad looked tense, his shoulders hunched. The man in the leather jacket was speaking with an air of authority, gesturing with his hands. Then the man reached into his jacket and pulled out a small, rectangular object. He handed it to my dad. My dad took it. He turned it over in his hands, his face unreadable. The man nodded, then turned and walked back to his car. As he drove away, my dad stood on the porch, holding the object. He stayed there for a long time, a solitary figure in the dim porch light. Finally, he walked inside. The front door closed with a soft click that echoed through the silent house. I held my breath, my heart hammering against my ribs. I didn't know what he'd received, but I knew, with a sickening certainty, that it was a piece of the puzzle, a piece that confirmed my deepest fears. The inheritance hadn't just brought money, it had brought the past, and the past, I was quickly learning, had a long, dark reach. My dad was a different man now, a man haunted by something I couldn't yet comprehend, and I was afraid of what he might do next. The silence in our house was no longer just a comfort, it was a warning. He locked the front door, the sound amplified in the stillness. I watched him from my bedroom window, a ghost in my own house. He didn't go to the kitchen for a drink, didn't go to his armchair. He went straight to his study, the door closing with a heavy finality that felt like a tomb sealing shut. I knew, with a chilling certainty that went beyond adolescent intuition, that whatever that man had given him was significant. It wasn't just a trinket or a memento. It was something that belonged to the secrets Grandpa had buried, secrets that were now being dug up, one by one. I stayed awake for hours, listening. The muffled sounds from the study, the scrape of a chair, the rustle of paper, a sigh that sounded more like a groan. They were a symphony of my disintegrating family. My parents' marriage, once the bedrock of my world, was now showing fault lines, deep cracks that threatened to swallow everything. My mom's quiet worry had morphed into a palpable fear, a constant shadow in her eyes. And my dad, my rock, was becoming a stranger, his face etched with a weariness that went bone deep, a weariness that no amount of sleep could cure. He was carrying a burden, and I was starting to suspect it was a burden he'd been unknowingly preparing for his entire life. The next morning, he was already dressed when I came downstairs for breakfast. He usually slept in on Saturdays, but today his movements were sharp, almost urgent. He was making coffee, his back to me, his shoulders stiff. The object the man had given him wasn't on display. It was hidden, of course. Where? I couldn't guess, but the air around my father felt different, charged, like the static electricity before a lightning strike. "Morning," I mumbled, sliding into a chair at the kitchen table. He turned, a perfunctory nod. "Morning." His voice was rough, like he hadn't slept at all or like he'd been yelling all night. There were dark circles under his eyes that hadn't been there before. My mom came in then, her smile forced, a fragile thing. "Coffee smells good, Robert." She glanced at him, then at me, her gaze lingering at me too long on my father. It was a silent conversation, a desperate plea for normalcy that neither of them could fulfill. He just grunted, pouring himself a mug. He didn't ask about my sleep, didn't ask about my plans for the day. He just stood there, sipping his coffee, his eyes fixed on some point beyond the kitchen window, as if he were seeing a landscape only he was privy to. "So," my mom began, her voice a little too bright, "I was thinking, maybe we could finally clear out the garage today. It's such a mess." My dad's head snapped back, his eyes finally focusing, but not on her. There was a flash of something in them, fear, anger, that quickly receded, replaced by that same faraway look. "Not today, Sarah. I have things to do." "Things?" My mom's voice had lost its forced cheerfulness. It was laced with a familiar, weary disappointment. "What kind of things, Robert? Are you going to the Elm Street house again?" He set his mug down with a clatter. "No, I'm not going to the Elm Street house." He paused, then added, his voice low and deliberate. "I have to deal with some loose ends." Loose ends. The phrase hung in the air like a threat. I watched my parents, two people I thought I knew better than anyone, now separated by an invisible wall of secrets.
My dad, caught in a vortex spun by his dead father's hidden life, and my mom, left to navigate the wreckage with a growing sense of dread. The next few days were a blur of hushed phone calls, my dad's increasingly erratic schedule, and my mom's silent, worried observation. He'd leave early, come home late, sometimes not at all. He'd lock himself in his study for hours, the door always ajar just enough for me to catch glimpses of him hunched over his desk, poring over papers, his brow furrowed in intense concentration. The object from the leather-jacketed man was never seen again, but its presence was a phantom weight in the house. Then came the confrontation. It wasn't dramatic, no yelling or throwing things. It was far worse. It was quiet, chillingly so. I was in the living room, trying to distract myself with a book, when I heard voices from my parents' bedroom. My mom's, soft but firm. My dad's, low and defensive. I could hear the raised voices, but not the words, until suddenly, my mom's voice broke, raw with pain. "I can't do this anymore, Robert," she cried, the sound sharp and piercing. "I can't live like this. You're disappearing right in front of me. And I need to know. I need to know what's going on." There was a beat of silence, then my dad's voice, strained. "You don't understand, Sarah. You can't. It's not safe." "Not safe? What's not safe? Is it about your father? About that house? What did he do, Robert? What did he leave you with?" Her voice was breaking, a sob catching in her throat. Another pause. I held my breath, my own heart pounding. This was it. The truth, or at least a piece of it, was about to be laid bare. Then my dad's voice, quiet but heavy with a confession I wasn't sure I was ready to hear. It's not just about the house, Sarah. It's about what he did and what he was." He sighed, a sound of utter defeat. "He wasn't the man we thought he was. None of us were. He was involved in things that were dangerous, things that have consequences." "What kind of things?" my mom whispered, her voice barely audible. "Things that put him in debt, to people who don't forgive debts, ever." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was a low, guttural growl. "He didn't leave me an inheritance, Sarah. He left me a ticking time bomb. And that man, the one who came the other night, he's here to collect, not on money, on favors." A cold dread washed over me. Favors. Debt. It sounded like something out of a bad movie, not our quiet suburban life. Favors? What favors? My mom's voice was trembling now, a fragile bird caught in a storm. He owed them, big time. And the only way he could settle it, the only way he could protect us, was to make arrangements, to set things up. The Elm Street house, the money in the bank, it was all part of it. But the real payment was me. My blood ran cold. Me. My dad was saying he was collateral for his father's debts? It was impossible. It was insane. But the raw pain in his voice, the desperation in my mom's sobs, they were all too real. He made a deal, my dad continued, his voice cracking. A deal to keep me safe, to keep you safe. He agreed to do certain tasks for them if anything ever happened to him. And now it's my turn. Tasks? My mom's voice was a strangled cry. What tasks, Robert? Tell me. I can't. His voice was thick with unshed tears. It's not something I can explain. It's in the ledger, the one we found. The ledger, the cryptic notes, the coded symbols, it all slammed into place with horrifying clarity. Grandpa hadn't been collecting coins and stamps. He'd been keeping a record of something far more sinister. So that's why you've been acting like this, my mom choked out. You're doing these things for them. I have to, he whispered. For all of us. I have to make sure they don't come for us. I have to finish what he started. My mom let out a wail that ripped through the house, a sound of pure agony. I felt like I was suffocating, my chest tight with a terror I'd never known. This wasn't just about betrayal. This was about a legacy of darkness, a hidden life that had now seeped into our own, poisoning everything it touched. My father wasn't just withdrawn, he was being forced into something horrific. And I, standing outside that door, was just as much a victim of his father's sins as he was. The inheritance wasn't just money, it was a blood contract passed down through generations, and my father was now trapped in its deadly embrace. I couldn't breathe. I backed away from the door, my legs feeling like lead. I needed to escape,
to get out of this house that was rapidly becoming a cage of secrets and fear. I stumbled towards the back door, needing air, needing to see the familiar, mundane world outside that now felt impossibly distant. As I fumbled with the lock, my dad's voice, cold and hollow, echoed from the bedroom, cutting through my panic. "The man who came last night," he said, his voice devoid of any warmth. He wasn't collecting. He was delivering. Delivering. My hand froze on the doorknob. Delivering what? Then my mom's broken whisper reached me. Delivering what, Robert? And my father's reply, delivered with a chilling finality that sent shivers down my spine, was a reminder that if I don't continue the work, then they'll come for you and for her. Her. He meant me. The implication was clear, a stark, brutal threat that hung heavy in the air. The man hadn't brought a debt collector, he'd brought an enforcer, a stark warning etched in whatever object he'd handed my dad. The inherited burden wasn't just my father's anymore, it was ours, and the only thing I knew for sure was that the quiet life we'd always taken for granted was gone, replaced by a terrifying new reality where our very lives were the price of my grandfather's hidden past. I finally wrenched the back door open, bursting out into the cool night air, but the terror followed me, a suffocating presence that promised our nightmare was only just beginning. The screen door slammed shut behind me, a sharp, violent sound that seemed to punctuate the end of everything I knew. The backyard was bathed in the pale glow of a crescent moon, the familiar swing set and overgrown rose bushes stark in the unnatural light. But it all felt alien, like a set piece from a play I no longer belonged in. I collapsed onto the dew-kissed grass, the damp seeping through my jeans, and just breathed, or tried to. My lungs felt constricted, a vice tightening around my chest, each breath a ragged, painful effort. Delivering a reminder. The words echoed in my head, a sinister refrain. My grandfather, the man who'd always smelled of pipe tobacco and old books, the man who taught me how to skip stones and tie a decent knot, was a monster, and his monstrosity was now my father's inheritance. My inheritance. My mother's. I stayed out there for what felt like hours, the cold seeping into my bones, the sounds of crickets and distant traffic a mocking soundtrack to my internal unraveling. Every whisper of wind through the oak trees sounded like a threat. Every shadow seemed to lengthen and contort, taking on menacing shapes. I thought of the man with the leather jacket, his eyes like chips of obsidian, his smile a predatory slash. He hadn't been selling me insurance, he'd been sealing a deal with my soul as collateral.
Eventually, the back door creaked open again. I didn't look up. I didn't need to. I knew it was my dad. He stood silhouetted against the faint light spilling from the house, his shoulders slumped, the weight of the world pressing down on him. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there, a statue carved from despair. I felt a surge of something, anger maybe, or just a profound, hollow ache, and finally, I pushed myself up. "What is it?" I managed, my voice hoarse, barely a whisper. "What kind of work?" He finally moved, taking a tentative step towards me. He looked so lost, so broken. The father I'd known, the one who could fix anything, who always had an answer, was gone, replaced by this haunted shell. He sat down on the damp grass a few feet away, his movements stiff, unnatural. I don't know everything," he admitted, his voice rough. "It's compartmentalized." He was careful, always was. "But I know it involves dealing with problems that can't be solved through normal channels." He gestured vaguely with his hand, as if trying to grasp an invisible, monstrous entity. "Loose ends. That's what I said, right? Loose ends." "And the man delivering the reminder?" I pressed, my voice hardening. I needed specifics. I needed to understand the true horror we were facing. What was in that little package he handed you? He flinched, as if the memory itself was a physical blow. It wasn't a package, not really. It was a symbol, a very specific symbol, and a date. He looked up at me, his eyes hollow pools reflecting the moonlight. "The date is next week." My stomach lurched. Next week? A deadline? A deadline for what? For the next task, he breathed out, the words barely audible. He made it clear. "If I don't comply, If I don't deliver what they expect, then they'll come, and they won't be polite. They'll make an example." He shuddered, a deep, convulsive tremor that ran through his entire body. "And you and your mother, you're the leverage." The words hit me like a physical blow. We were leverage. Our lives were currency in my grandfather's clandestine world. My mind reeled, trying to process the sheer, unimaginable evil. My grandfather, the pillar of the community, the man who'd volunteered at the local library, had been involved in what? Organized crime? Espionage? Something far darker, something that left a trail of debt and danger in its wake. "What kind of tasks?" I demanded, my voice shaking with a mixture of fear and a nascent, dangerous rage. "What did he do that was so bad that people are willing to threaten us to get you to continue it?" He closed his eyes, a silent plea for respite. "He was a facilitator, a fixer, for certain powerful people. People who wanted things done quietly, illegally. He was good at it, too good." He opened his eyes, and I saw a glimmer of the man he used to be, a flicker of the pride that had once defined him, now twisted and curdled into something grotesque. He made a lot of people beholden to him, and when he died, the debts remained, and the favors owed. "So you're supposed to take over his business?" The word felt ludicrous, absurd. You're an accountant, Dad. You balance spreadsheets. You don't do tasks." He let out a bitter laugh, devoid of humor. "That's what they thought. That's what I thought. But my father, he planned for this. He didn't trust me to inherit his empire, not really. But he knew he owed them, and he knew he had to provide a successor. He built this legacy of obligation, and the ledger," he gestured towards the house, "it's the key. It tells me who they are, what they want, and what I have to do." I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. The ledger, the cryptic scribbles. My grandfather wasn't just keeping records. He was keeping a hit list, a ledger of sins that now demanded a blood tribute. "So what does the ledger say for next week?" I asked, my voice flat. I had to know. I had to understand the monster we were up against. He hesitated, his gaze darting back towards the house, as if the walls themselves held ears. I can't say. Not yet. It's too dangerous. If they knew I was telling you," he trailed off, the unspoken thread hanging heavy in the air. But then he saw the raw terror in my eyes, the desperate need for information, and he sighed, a sound of utter surrender. "It involves discretion and a certain acquisition." "Acquisition," I repeated, my mind racing. "Like stealing something?" "Something like that." He looked away, his jaw tight. "Something valuable, and something that belongs to someone who shouldn't be crossed. He made arrangements for it to be moved, facilitated, and now the courier is me." The horror of it all was beginning to set in, a crushing weight that threatened to suffocate me. My father, my kind, gentle father, was being forced into becoming a criminal, and all because of a dead man's choices. Why didn't he just pay them off? I asked, the question desperate and futile. "He couldn't," my dad said, his voice strained. "It was more than that. It was about power, influence. He was a pawn in a much bigger game, and he used his position, his skills, to stay in it, to protect us, by making himself indispensable." He looked at me, his eyes filled with a deep, soul-crushing regret. He thought he was clever. He thought he'd set it up so I'd be safe, that I'd inherit his protection. But he just chained me to the same masters. The words echoed in my mind. His protection. I thought of the leather-jacketed man, the symbol, the date. This wasn't protection. It was a prison built by my grandfather, with my father as the warden, and my mother and I as the hostages. "What about Mom?" I asked, the question a knot of fear in my throat. He finally turned to face me fully, his face a mask of anguish. She knows, or she suspects. She's scared. But I told her I'm doing what I have to do to keep us safe, that it's temporary, that I'll find a way out." He paused, his voice cracking.
I don't know if I will." A tear traced a path down his cheek, catching the moonlight. I'd never seen my father cry, not once, not even when his own father died. And seeing him like this, broken and defeated, ignited something within me. It wasn't just fear anymore. It was a cold, hard resolve. I wouldn't let my grandfather's sins destroy my family. I wouldn't let my father be a pawn. "There has to be a way out," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "You said the ledger is the key. If we can understand it, if we can figure out what he was really doing, maybe we can use it against them." He looked at me, a flicker of something. Surprise, hope, in his eyes. "You want to help? You want to get involved?" "I'm already involved," I said, the truth of it hitting me with full force. "Whether I like it or not, and I'm not going to sit by and watch you get destroyed by ghosts." I took a deep breath, the cold night air filling my lungs, steadying me. "We can do this. Together. We find out what Grandpa was really up to. We find out who these people are, and then we fight back." He stared at me for a long moment, his gaze intense, searching. The silence stretched, heavy with unspoken emotions. Then, a slow nod, a tiny, almost imperceptible shift in his posture.
He stood up, and for the first time since that man had arrived, he didn't look entirely broken. He looked resolute. "Okay," he said, his voice firm. "Okay, we do it together, but we have to be smart. We have to be careful, and we have to be ruthless." I nodded, the word feeling foreign and yet strangely right. Ruthless. It was a word my grandfather would have understood, a word I was beginning to understand. We walked back towards the house, the familiar structure now imbued with a terrifying new significance. The secrets hidden within its walls were no longer just whispers. They were a roaring torrent, threatening to drown us. But as we stepped through the back door, leaving the cold, moonlit yard behind, I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. The fear was still there, a constant thrum beneath the surface, but it was now tempered by a fierce determination. The game had changed, and we were no longer just victims. We were players, and we were going to win. The fight for our lives and for the soul of our family had just begun, and I knew with a chilling certainty that it was going to be a long, brutal, and possibly the most important battle we would ever face. The weight of it was immense, but standing beside my father, the man I now saw not as a victim, but as a fellow warrior, I felt a strange kind of strength bloom in the desolate landscape of my fear. We were in this together, and somehow that made all the difference. The night was far from over, but for the first time, I felt a glimmer of light in the encroaching darkness. This was our inheritance now, and we would not be defined by the sins of the past, but by the courage we found in facing them.